Hey there, Jordan here. Today we are bringing you one of our favorite Feeling Seen episodes. Raúl Castillo talking about The Outsiders and how he felt seen by Matt Dillon as Dallas Winston. This episode originally came out on Thanksgiving Day in 2022, where we love to just put little treasures for you to find. And you will hear me bringing that up at the very end of the show with a very holiday timely one quick thing pick. But in our present moment, you can watch Raúl Castillo playing a very meaty role opposite Gael Garcia Bernal. What a 1-2 punch in the movie Cassandro, which was a big hit at Sundance and is finally available to watch streaming via Amazon Prime. And hey, the biggest news this week, we gotta shout it out. The WGA has come to it at this moment, tentative agreement with the studios. The strike ended at 12:01 a.m. on September 27th. This is absolutely gargantuan news. From anything I've read, by all indications, this is a truly historic deal, and now it is time to continue a truly historic stand on behalf of SAG, who is still on strike, awaiting new contracts for their union. And we are thinking at this time of the animators who are unionizing and the visual effects professionals who are unionizing. Solidarity, stand together. Truly, the people who make the things in this industry can get things done with the people who sign checks if they all stand shoulder to shoulder. So that is very exciting. And now please enjoy, in that spirit of creativity and standing together, this episode with Raúl Castillo. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Feeling Seen, the podcast that talks about the movies that make us feel seen. And my co-host, you couldn't fall off a rock and not hit something my co-host for today has been in the past 2 years. I think there's something like, in just 21 and 2022, there's somewhere around 10 credits. Okay, so coming up, you might see Raúl Castillo in The Inspection. Maybe you'll see him in Miguel Wants to Fight. Maybe you'll see him in the FX series Class of 09. You could have seen him earlier this year in the heralded movie out of Sundance, Cha Cha Real Smooth. Or maybe you like Broadway. Maybe you like a off-Broadway show and you've seen him in American televisions. Maybe you were a fan of Looking. Maybe you saw the kick-ass Jason Statham Guy Ritchie movie Wrath of Man earlier this year. I could go on, but that would defeat the rest of the conversation. Raúl, what else do the people need to know about you before we get started, besides that just like past few years of resume that I have given?
They should know that I'm a Virgo, first and foremost.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So what is The Inspection the most immediate thing you have coming up of all of those things I listed in your impending credits?
Absolutely. I had a film called The Same Storm that debuted here in New York and LA, at the Lamley in LA, the Quad in here in New York.
The Same Storm,
That's right.
Yes.
It's a Peter Hedges film that we shot in August of 2020, all remotely. And yeah, I shot both of my scenes from home on Zoom or FaceTime. I can't remember which it was. And every actor worked from their own individual homes, and it was it's a COVID-inspired film, so it's all meant to be remote. I have a great scene opposite Mary Louise Parker, who I'm a huge fan of. And
fantastic!
Yeah, but the cast is like littered with tons of like amazing people: Sandra Oh and Judith Light, Elaine May, John Gallagher Jr., Corey Michael Smith, like Ron Livingston, Rosemary DeWitt. Like it's just like this stellar cast all across the board, and I'm like I feel proud.
Okay.
To be a part of that. So there's that. And then, The Inspection, which comes out in theaters November 18th.
And that is A24's upcoming release. And that is about a closeted soldier in the United States Army, correct?
Yeah, I wouldn't say he's closeted. I just wouldn't say he's comfortably out. The film takes place in, because he's very much like, very much embraces his queerness. But he's this young homeless kid. It's based off the director's life. The director is a guy named Elegance Bratton. He was, homeless for 10 years. He'd been kicked out of home for his sexuality, and he was kind of stuck in a place, and he decided to enlist in the Marines. And so And he served for 8 years, in fact, Elegance did, in the era of Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Right.
Yeah. So our film takes place in 2005, and it's only about, it's not autobiographical, it's based on true events. So it's very much a fictionalized account of his own experience, but it's about, specifically about boot camp, about this young recruit's experience in boot camp and overcoming all odds and becoming a Marine. Yeah.
Well, the character that you have brought for us to discuss today, tell us a little bit about who that is and what movie we will be sort of diving into for our discussion.
Yeah, so, I'm a gut-oriented person. I just trust my gut. And when the email came through about the podcast, it was like it hit me immediately, and I didn't want to overthink it and try to curate the answer too much.
It can really stump people. So I think think that's kind of like, well, I'm either going to sit and really ruminate on this, or I've got to take it like a thunderclap.
No. To me, I knew exactly what it was. And, the summer before my freshman year of high school, I somehow wound up with a VHS copy of Francis Ford Coppola's adaptation of S.E. Hinton's The Outsiders. And I must have watched that every day that summer.
Wow.
We didn't have a lot of money. There wasn't a lot to do in the summer, so I stayed home a lot. And specifically, Matt Dillon's character of Dallas is who really I connected with. But really, all those characters, all the outsiders, I connected with. But that movie, I didn't think about it a whole lot. I just liked watching it.
Okay.
I was 13 years old, so there wasn't a lot of.
That's a great age to find the outsiders.
You know what I mean? And I like looking back that year, I was transitioning. I went to Catholic school until 8th grade, and I was transitioning to public school. And part of my journey in Catholic school, like I'm first generation American. My parents are from northern Mexico, and we were born in the U.S. and we were raised here in the United States, and in a very much a bicultural upbringing. And we didn't have a lot growing up, but my parents put a lot of emphasis in education, and so they were nervous about raising kids on the American side because they didn't know what that looked like. They were both generationally speaking from Mexico, and even though we were in that part of the border. Because I grew up 10 minutes from where my parents are from in Mexico.
Oh, okay.
And we've been on that part of the border on both sides of my family before that was a border, just to give you an idea. And
I think I've read you talk about how it was very porous when you were growing up. Like you being able to go back and forth to where your family was from was very easy for you. It was a part of your life.
Yep. They were nervous about us being raised on this side, and they put us into Catholic school, private school. They put all their money into our education. And as you can imagine, there was like in a lot of private schools, there's the haves and the have-nots, and for a long time, I wasn't really aware of it until you start to get to like the junior high age, and all of a sudden, young people their individuality starts to come forward, and that's when funny enough, my 6th grade year is when I started to get into punk rock. I was heavily into like rock and roll of the era, like. The hair metal of the times, and my brother and I were starting to get into rock and roll, and Motley Crue and Poison, all that stuff. All that stuff just spoke to us for some reason. And then I remember hearing the Ramones for the first time. I was watching National Lampoon's Vacation.
Wow, what an aesthetic journey to go from CeCe DeVille to Joey Ramone.
Totally, completely. Exactly, you feel me.
Give me crack corn and I don't. Let's go. Let's go. The bumping in the straight line. You're going through a tight one. You keep the listen that mind. Let's creep.
And I was like, what is that? What I remember it just it spoke to me, and I didn't know why. And I don't know how I found. Oh yeah, I must have gone to the closing credits and found out that it was the Ramones. And I'd heard of the Ramones, but I didn't really quite know who they are. I lived in a very small town.
When Shazam was watching to the end of the credits to find out what song you had just heard.
Exactly. So I started. We had very little access at that time. You couldn't Amazon stuff. You couldn't. It was whatever our local little skate shop sold. They sold some tapes, and We would share stuff with friends, record stuff tape to tape. And I started getting into punk rock. And that kind of really spoke to me because to be a punk rocker, you didn't have to have a lot. Your worth wasn't the things that you owned. Fugazi and the DC scene later, those bands, Bad Brains and Minor Threat, those started to speak to me a little bit later because it wasn't about material possessions. It was about, what was up in your mind and heart. And and so punk rock really became very meaningful to me at that age, 11, 12, 13. So that summer, I think when I saw The Outsiders, I connected with those characters.
The
so
social
much.
culture is like emerging around you as middle schoolers are starting to show their material wealth.
Exactly.
You can't win. You know that, don't you? Doesn't matter if you whip us, you'll still be where you were before, at the bottom. And we'll still be the lucky ones at the top with all the breaks. Doesn't matter. Greasers will still be greasers and socials will still be socials. It doesn't matter.
And it certainly Ponyboy was of course, every young boy connected with Ponyboy. But to me, Dallas and Matt Dillon as Dallas was so magnetic.
Yeah.
What's going on, Dale?
What's up?
We're early.
What do you want to do?
Nothing legal, man. Let's get at it.
So it's a very multiple layered. I feel most seen maybe by Ponyboy in some ways because I do feel golden. I do feel like that.
Yeah.
I felt that S.E. Hinton was so brilliant and she spoke so brilliantly to that she was a young woman in Oklahoma and wrote so she could understood young boys so well is truly remarkable. And certainly young boys of a certain class. And but Dallas was so charismatic, and Matt Dillon is so amazing. He's so incredible in that movie. And I don't know, I just wanted to be Dallas. And I remember I had a picture of Matt Dillon on my dresser. I'd found it in a magazine. I cut it out and put it on my dresser. And
you and millions more. Millions more.
Yeah, totally. And I remember a girl cousin of mine, from Mexico, coming into my room and asking me if I was gay, because I had a male actor on my dresser, but it hadn't even occurred to me. I was just no, I had band posters everywhere as well.
Yeah, he's just fucking cool, man.
Yeah, he's just cool. I had a picture of Mila Jovovich too. She didn't say anything about that.
Dazzling spectrum.
Totally. I didn't know this then because I was just starting to get into acting. That was literally my freshman year when I went in. So my freshman year I went into public school. And then I was in the wild and sort of in this new environment. And
is that when you started finding theater and stuff?
That's right. That's exactly it. That was the year. That was that following that summer. And I remember a friend of mine saying he really wanted our drama teacher to do The Outsiders for the one-act play. And I was like, I love that movie. Let's do that for the one-act play. Well, they didn't end up doing it, sadly, because they wanted, they wanted a play with a balance of boys and girls.
Sure, okay.
There was probably more girls auditioning for the school.
And we actually had a pretty prevalent musical theater program in my high school.
Yeah.
But it was still even with the amount of participation that we got, it was kind of if you were a boy and you auditioned, you were getting in that show. But there was going to be a lot of girls turned away at the door.
Exactly.
Just by comparison of volumes of who auditioned. Exactly.
So that story and that group of friends and who they are in this town and. I don't know. It wasn't an intellectual thing. It was just I don't know. It just spoke to me and I just watched it over and over again. It just comforted me in a way.
Were you a vulnerable teen or were you, because I think an interesting thing that Dillon, he has the most sort of dramatic arc throughout the course of the movie.
Oh my God, you're so right.
You meet him as a dickhead and a womanizer. And he everybody goes on their sort of journey, but he's the one who really becomes a different person over the course of it. And it seems like that hinges on his inability to or unwillingness to access his emotional vulnerability until the point where it just explodes out of him.
Hey, you're not allowed here.
I'm allowed anywhere I want.
You're out of your mind.
Why do you bother helping people, huh? Doesn't do any good.
And so I wondered if you were the vulnerable Dillon in there, the vulnerable Dally, or if you were like the kind of tough holding up the outside Dally.
Jordan, I don't want to cry on your podcast. I'm not going to cry on your podcast.
Raúl, it happens a lot. So I welcome your honesty and your candor, and I want to be here for you.
You know, it's so interesting because I hadn't even thought about that. I was so focused on who he is at the front of the movie, who he is with Cherry, and that I'd forgotten about him in that hospital bed. And having that moment, you know, when he goes in and saves those kids. Oh my God, I absolutely forgot about that.
Well, I think that's how Dally kind of endures, and even his outrage at the end, it feels so familiar in the context of sort of like the chauvinism that comes before it. But like he's so unable to reconcile how strongly he loved Johnny and has just lost his friend Ralph Macchio's character, that he like when Ponyboy gets home and he goes to his brother, when he goes to Patrick Swayze, he's like Dally can't take it. Like, I don't know what he's going to do. And he's breaking things. He's stealing from people. He's crying. He doesn't know how to feel outwardly because he only can survive if he keeps it inside.
Yeah. That makes absolute sense.
Told him about beating his socials. I don't know, he just died. Told me to stay gold. Dally's gone. He couldn't take it. He's gonna blow.
Yeah. That his outrage. I mean, like I that's interesting. That's interesting because I was becoming really aware of like class at the time, and where I fit in that structure, and I think I did feel. I think the thing that punk rock really allowed me to release was an outrage. And of course, you know, and I had nothing to be outraged about. I was somewhat privileged compared to a lot of the kids that I grew up around, you know, and grew up with. But I saw like, you know, material wealth and that I didn't have, and I saw more than that. I saw injustices that I felt really frustrated by. I saw like I saw a society where people with money were valued and people without it weren't, and yeah, that story and Dally's specifically, yeah, that's interesting.
Well, I was reading, like, you know, we go through and we prep for these things and we read interviews, and you know, I was reading one from back when The Looking film was about to come out, and you were talking about like having growing up on a border town and being a Mexican American man. Like there is the duality of being, like you were talking about how there's always kind of a performance of one or the other of self. Like you're either too Mexican in America to be an American, or you're too American in Mexico to be a Mexican.
That's right.
And as I've talked so many times on the show about, like the coolest thing about getting to do this is watching people's character picks through the specific lens of who I'm going to be speaking to. And like watching Dallas, the thing I kept focusing on about that character was his seemingly being the most sort of rigid personality within the movie, and sort of most like obnoxiously so at points. But really, like, he seems to be the one doing the most performance of self, because he seems to be the one most uncomfortable with his interior life compared to his externality. Whereas Emilio Estevez's character, he's perfectly fucking fine just being an alcoholic and sort of like joking his way through the day. Like Patrick Swayze, like they tell us in the movie, like your brother would be a soch if it wasn't for the rest of us. Like he hangs around here and is a greaser because of us, like because we're his family. But Dally is the one sort of unable to reconcile the two halves of himself. And so I had to start watching watching the performance in terms of like what you were saying about a person identifying with this individual being a performance of two things and not necessarily being able to settle into one or the other. And I wanted to hear from you where you felt like you were at in terms of that. Like, do you feel like at this point in your life an opportunity more coalesced, or does that nature of performance stick with you throughout your entire life because it's just so conditioned and ingrained from like a day one instance?
Yeah, like, I'm still, no matter how far I go in my career, whenever like I start a project, if I don't know anyone, it's still the first day of school for me.
Yeah.
And I'm a middle child, so I'm a second born. And I think when you're the second born, sometimes you're used to your older sibling doing the talking for you.
Yeah.
So you get kind of, you're a little shyer. I'm by nature shy, even though I know I'm an actor and like I have a very public
I feel like I consistently find actors to be more on the shy side, more on the introversion side of the spectrum than the extroversion one.
Yeah, 100%. And I was kind of, when I was a kid, like if I felt comfortable in the company I was in, I was a total clown. But then, and then I went to public school, and by the time I was knowing very few kids, by the time I was a senior, I was voted most popular. I was because I made friends in like different social circles. Like I made friends with everybody. I wasn't just like about the elites or like and so I'm not entirely shy. I could be a bit of a class clown, but at times I could be like when I'm in new environments, it can be kind of. People are using the term now, imposter syndrome, and it resonates for me. I totally understand that because I've felt that throughout my life. So, but I've always been pretty good about the work. If I can focus on if I like the work, if I like the character I'm playing and the story I'm telling, when I'm working, I'm not nervous at all. But I think in some ways that I'll always be like that kid. It's like the first day of school.
Well, then I wonder with like a character, obviously like a degree of prominence came with playing Richie in Looking. And what when you play a character like that, who like, he's kind of he's around a bunch of these neurotic white gays in San Francisco. And I lived in San Francisco for 7 years. I know many of them. And just playing a character so embodied and sure in his identities as Richie, what do you take from characters like that when you get to live inside them for an extended period of time, as TV affords you to do, where that is something like you have that kind of first day of school mentality? Can characters that you play operate as these sort of instructive presences in your life, like almost like learning from a friend?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Richie is like way more self-assured than I am. Like I would never, I mean, certainly not now because I have a fiance, but I would never like hit on a stranger on a train.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like flirt with a complete stranger in any scenario like that, like the way that, so he's a lot more confident, I think, externally confident than I am. He's a lot more self-assured. He's better at standing up for himself than I am. There's a lot to learn from him and some of the characters that I've gotten to play.
We're going to take a quick break, but we will be right back with a lot more Raúl Castillo on The Outsiders. Then I'll have one quick thing before I go about the beloved, widely acknowledged Thanksgiving classic, Addams Family Values. So stick around for that.
Hi, this is Lori Kilmartin.
And I'm Jackie Cation. And we have a podcast called The Jackie and Lori Show on Max Fun, and it's very exciting because what do we talk about?
Comedy.
Stand-up comedy. We both do stand-up comedy and have since the dawn of
Well,
Christ.
Jackie.
Is that offensive?
It is offensive to me because you've aged me. We started in the late 80s and we're still here. You can't kill us.
So go to The Jackie and Lori Show on Max Fun and listen to that.
The Jackie and Lori Show. New episodes Monday, only on MaximumFun.org.
Greatest Trek is the podcast for all your modern Star Trek needs. It's funny, informative, and now it's also timely.
That's because every Friday, right after the release of a new episode of Strange New Worlds, Picard, Lower Decks, Discovery, or Prodigy, we bring you a review of that episode.
There's some great new Star Trek coming up, and we're going to cover all of it.
You'll like our show because we're both former video producers, so we bring a lot of insight into the production and filmmaking aspects to these episodes.
And we also have a very refined sense of humor, so we make lots of delightful fart jokes along the way.
So come see why Greatest Trek is one of the most popular television recap podcasts on all of the internet.
Subscribe to Greatest Trek at MaximumFun.org or in the podcast app you're using right now.
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. Raúl Castillo is starring alongside Jeremy Pope in the new movie The Inspection, and that's just the latest of his many recent credits. Raúl knew right away that he felt seen by 1983's The Outsiders, so our conversation today is coming through that lens. Let's get back to it. You are a playwright in addition to a stage actor.
Yeah,
and
I'm a recovering playwright.
You are a recovering playwright, and that's very real. I mean, I think Patti LuPone burned her Actors Equity card yesterday. She posted on Twitter. She was like, "That's it, I'm done." And
I heard about that.
Patti LuPone only store bought publicly. You're Patti LuPone, and so feeling so connected to a character like Dallas, Matt Dillon's Dallas in The Outsiders, and then in your work, you've very publicly and vocally been a champion of Latinx playwriters and creatives, and wanting to champion their work, and you yourself have a career that can now serve as a vehicle of representation and feeling seen for other people. And I wanted to talk to you about what you might have felt like as the lack thereof, or perhaps only intermittently placed more one-to-one representation that you saw or not, growing up in media, being right on the border. Maybe you were taking in movies and art and TV from Mexico, where you were I didn't need your American bullshit stuff that wasn't serving me. But a big part of the conversation I like to have here on the show is people grafting themselves onto imperfect images on the screen because they themselves don't necessarily have the one-to-one options. And I wanted to, in your career of being I am going to bring artists of my culture and background into the fore and champion this work, I wanted to hear about sort of the tension there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I was being introduced to theater, it was it was the Neil Simons and the Tennessee Williams, of course, and traditional white American playwrights that were in the zeitgeist at the time, and that's what I was being exposed to. And when I was a sophomore in high school, I found an old weathered copy of the Nuyorican Poets Cafe book of poetry in my high school library, and I discovered the poetry of a writer named Miguel Piñero. And he was a really interesting individual, Miguel Piñero. He had an interesting life. He was a guy who had been in prison, in and out of prison throughout life. He was he was a drug addict and petty thief, and he was also this really charismatic poet, and he was taking these writing. He was up in Sing Sing prison, and he was doing these writing workshops. Artists from the city were coming up and teaching inmates, poetry and drama, and he wrote a play called Short Eyes, and I remember I read Short Eyes when I was in high school, and it's a wild play. If you haven't read it, they made a movie of it back in the 70s. It's a wild ass movie, and certainly so far from my own experience, my own life experience. But when I saw that blend of the Spanglish that Miguel Piñero worked with in his writing, I was blown away because I didn't know that you could do that. I'd never read anything quite like it. So, and then at the same time, around that time, I remember seeing John Leguizamo in Carlito's Way, which that could have been another performance that I picked because, that was, I remember watching him do that and being like, whoa, and I'd been hearing about him because he was doing these one-man shows, and my brother my brother's girlfriend at the time had cable, and they would show Mambo Mouth and Spicorama, his one-man shows. They would show him on HBO, and we didn't have HBO.
That was how I was like introduced to John Leguizamo, was his one-man specials on HBO.
Yeah. My brother's girlfriend Tabitha had her parents had cable, so he came home and he would tell me about these one-man shows, and they sounded so great. And when I saw him in Carlito's Way, I remember being blown away. So I can point to like those artists or those who sort of I felt even someone like Raúl Julia. I mean, he had my name. And he was a and he was like he was a Raúl. He was in Spanish you would call them tocayo. Tocayo is someone. It's the person you're named after, but anyone who has your name can be a tocayo.
Okay.
And Raúl Julia was an absolute genius. I mean, we lost him way ahead of his time. I mean, those things were important to me, and I could certainly pinpoint Latinx artists that I came across as writers, actors, and then certainly stuff that was coming out of Mexico in the 90s and 80s. It was not the best time in Mexican cinema, but my parents always spoke about the golden age of Mexican cinema, this era in like the 40s, 50s, 60s, where all this wonderful filmmaking was going on, and hearing my parents' stories about that era and those movies and these greats like Maria Felix and Dolores del Rio and Jorge Negrete and just all these amazing actors and singers and like this great art that was created, and hearing those stories. Last year, I'm going to do a little plug here, but last year I got to work in Mexico for the first time. I worked in Mexico City.
Okay.
I shot a film with Gael Garcia Bernal called Cassandro that's written and directed by a guy named Roger Ross Williams, who's a documentarian for Hulu. I think it will be coming out next year. But we were shooting in these studios, and Estudios Churubusco, they're called. And when I told my mom, I wasn't familiar, but when I told my mom I was working in Estudios Churubusco, she like lit up. They're like these historical studios from movies when she was a girl that she would, watch. And I'm working in those studios, and we come from like no one in my family acted, no one did any of this stuff. We never imagined ourselves like being part of like that world. So it was. I wish my dad was still around just so he can, could have seen that, because I know he would have been so enamored with that idea. But yeah, it's I think it's an interesting time because there's like, even since the time that we did Looking, like conversation has gotten more interesting and more like complex and around diversity and around representation, and I'm here for it. I'm I want the conversation to continue.
Well, and you just said you're a recovering playwright, and I've read a bit about you talking about how you felt a sense of disillusionment within like the American institution of theater, and I wanted to hear from you where to you is the most interesting conversation around what you can do with character. Is it film? Is it television? Do you feel like that is something that's available for you in stage?
I feel like it's available in all three mediums, and I'm becoming, and now with the body of experience that I have under my belt, I can be smarter about choosing the projects. Like now I have, when you're starting out, you're sort of taking work wherever you can get it. Yeah. And as you progress in your career, and if you're fortunate enough to build and to continue to build, and now I can be more selective about who I choose to collaborate with, the projects that I sign on to, and I've had heartbreaks in each of the mediums. Yeah, in all three of those mediums.
Yeah, the common thread of those mediums is heartbreak.
Exactly, and then the flip side is true. I've had the most beautiful experiences in all three of those mediums. American Televisions that I just closed on in New York Theater Workshop was like. That group of artists, that company of actors, that team of creative people who put that thing together was like, it was an absolute like love fest. I hadn't done a play in 8 years, so it was great to go back to the theater. And I've had my heartbreaks in theater, and writing is so personal that and acting is keeping me busy. So, I may write again one day. Like now, I'm just like focusing on the acting part of my life. But I think I've become a lot wiser about, sort of picking who I align myself with and who I want to collaborate with and make art with at the end of the day.
Well, and I was reading another interview with you too, where you talked about how like early on in like when you were getting started as an actor, it sounds like there was a sort of feeling of sense like I didn't know that I would fit as an actor. Like I didn't feel like I was sort of like the image of what an actor was. I didn't know that if this was an option available to me, and I wondered if and when you had sort of crossed that threshold, and now with like the volume of work you're doing, and like you said, being in a position to be selective about who you can collaborate with, do you feel like did you realize that you fit? Or did you realize that you needed to make a space where you would fit regardless and everyone would kind of have to deal with it?
It was interesting when they sent me the email, and I got the email about this podcast because I've been thinking a lot about the nature of being seen. And
thinking about it all the time. I totally relate.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about it in terms of my acting, specifically about my screen acting, but also my stage acting as well. But like I said, I'm a middle child, so I think getting on stage initially was a way to be seen, a way to get attention, a way to like. Initially, it was just because I thought girls like actors, and I could be seen in that way. But ultimately, then I started to enjoy embodying characters and bringing them to life, and people connecting to the work and being seen in that way.
Yeah.
So I was a theater kid for many years, and then after going to college and studying theater, I did my first short film, probably a year after college. But I've been thinking a lot about this concept in the last couple of years. That I think the reason screen acting specifically that I had more success than I had in theater acting. I'm a fine theater actor. I think I can and will have opportunities to grow and continue to grow in the theater, I hope. But with screen acting, there was something about the camera that I learned early on. No one taught me this. I just kind of instinctually knew it, that the camera saw everything that I did. I didn't have to fight for attention with the camera. That I didn't have to emote. I just had to go through what the character was going through and live truthfully in the given circumstances, and the camera would see it. And the camera became my friend early on because the camera sees me and the camera loves me. And there's something kind of bizarre and disconnected about that, but it's truthful. I mean, it was like, that's why I think like, I returned to even when I didn't think I could be an actor, and even when I didn't think there were going to be opportunities for someone like me, I loved doing it so much. And I loved when the work would connect with people, and specifically with screen acting, when you do things for the camera and it captures it and then people watch it and they connect with the work, there's something so special about that. There's I don't know if I answered your question, but that's something I've been thinking a lot about. But
well, I mean, you spent. I feel like there is a symmetry to the fact that you spent a summer watching this movie that you discovered at 14 years old with The Outsiders, and then the next year you go into public school, and that's when you start on your own investigating theater and performance. And however, even if you weren't intellectualizing it at the time, whatever you were experiencing on there, like, it's clearly a movie that resonated with you to the point where you get this question about this podcast now and you're like, I know immediately my gut what this answer is. Like, it left that kind of lasting mark on you. And then you hit this threshold in your life where cultural schisms are emerging, you're in a different environment, and then you have these new options available to you. And I have to believe there's a sort of sense memory of what you felt experiencing such a connection through art and through the camera yourself, being on the other side of it.
Absolutely.
That's why I love doing this show, because like these things really matter. Like, to me, it's exciting how much they matter, because it means keep doing it. It's hard, but keep doing it. Like, it's imperfect, but keep doing it, because you can be here decades later in your life and being like, man, The Outsiders, a 1983 movie by Francis Ford Coppola, that movie really stuck with me.
Absolutely.
In 30 years later.
Yeah. It's interesting now that like, because I think that movie, like, to me, I said this to my playwright for American Televisions, and I felt this affinity with them because they have such a, Victor Casar is the name of the playwright. They have such an affinity for underdogs. Mm-hmm. And The Outsiders is all about the underdogs. Mm-hmm. And when I think about The Inspection, just to bring it, full circle back to this film, Ellis French, who's very geniusly played by the wonderful Jeremy Pope in our film in The Inspection, that character is the most, like, he's the embodiment of the underdog. The Inspection is kind of like, I've been thinking a lot about Rocky, and so how people kind of overcome odds. But I've always connected to the underdog. I always, in any room that I'm in, if I have any bit of power, I hope that I use that power to lift up any underdog, and I think that's what my character does in The Inspection, and that's something I connected with in that story specifically, and yeah, it's interesting that The Outsiders, I mean, it was like it came to me immediately. I didn't have to think about it, and Dally is like Dally. I was the character, and it's crazy that I didn't even think about his emotional trajectory, because I was just thinking of like the charismatic side of Matt Dillon, and not like the kind of pouring rage and heart that we see toward the end, which is, as soon as he started speaking to that, I got emotional, because I was like, I wondered how that resonated for me at 14 years old, without even really knowing it.
And I gotta believe it was something in there, because if you're gonna watch a movie every day, it's like, it's gotta be working for you on kind of every level. And you're having a sort of new day with it each time. Just like, it can't just be the fucking best and be rad. It can also be like, I don't know why. It's like when you, like, I feel like when you have like a crush in your teen years and you're like, I just think they're really cool. That's all. Like, it's not that like I haven't, like, they're just really cool. I just want to hang out with them like all the time. It's like, all the time. There's a name for what you're feeling right now.
Speaking of crushes, Diane Lane. Is that Diane Lane as Cherry?
No,
oh my God.
Cherry Valance. I was watching when I was watching it again, when I was watching The Outsiders again for this, I was like, shouts out to Diane Lane, who was just cast over and over again at the beginning of her career as the unattainable dream girl. It's like, we need the archetype for a fantasy teen. Like, let's do Streets of Fire, Diane Lane, pop star. Let's do The Outsiders, Cherry Valance, Rumblefish, anyone? Let's keep making Diane Lane a fantasy. And it worked every time. They were right every time Diane Lane played a perfect girl.
I was so in love with her. As was Dallas. And
then there's there's that perfect teen moment in that where he's horrible to her, and they have like a scrape, and the socias and the greases are coming together, and she's like, I hope I never see that guy again. I'll probably fall in love with him. And then she storms off. It was like, oh, Cherry, you will.
Yes.
No.
Yes. If I see you in school and I don't say hi, please don't take it personal, okay?
Yeah, I know.
Really, you're a nice boy and everything.
It's okay.
I hope I never see Dallas Winston again. If I do, I'd probably fall in love with him.
Come on, baby.
Don't touch me.
No! Yes, don't let him have a chance, Cherry.
I was like, I have a chance with Diane Lane. That's what I was thinking. It's funny. So my parents are from a state called Tamaulipas, which is like the northeasternmost state in the border on the Mexican side. And I sometimes, semi-facetiously, semi-not, refer to Tamaulipas as like the Oklahoma of Mexico, because it's like this kind of forgotten state. It's not that it's forgotten, it's just like overlooked a lot. And being from the border, not necessarily from Texas specifically, but like from the border more specifically, you often feel forgotten. You feel forgotten by the rest of the country. You feel forgotten by the rest of the state. You don't feel like you belong in the conversation. And so it's like no wonder The Outsiders resonated for me as specifically as a border kid. Like, you know, like
yeah.
I think it's awesome.
I think that like with what you said about like the source material being written by a woman, and then you have this Francis Ford Coppola adaptation, and I think, and then to have, then that's like set in Oklahoma, and here you are, it's hitting you as a Mexican American kid growing up on the border, a place that kind of seems like like you're describing it, kind of sounds like a snow globe, sort of with the world around it, but it's sort of encased on its own. And with people making like whatever presumptions they will make about what goes on in that little enclosed snow globe that they're not a part of. And I think it speaks so like this conversation paired with the movie itself, I think speaks so well to that like transmutable power of being able to identify yourself in a place, and sort of the way that a storyteller with the proper amount of like tenderness and empathy can translate an experience that is not one-to-one their own, and a demonstration of like how fully you can imbue characters with life and reality without living the specifics of their existence, but giving them the honor and respect of having specific lives that are fully fleshed out within their own world, instead of just making them broad strokes.
That's right. And there's so many, you know, we should point out there's so many great performances, so many great appearances. Like, you know, there's like you said, Emilio Estevez, there's C. Thomas Howell, there's Tom Cruise.
Real early Tom Cruise there.
Yeah.
Watching it just blows me away anytime I watch a movie from the 80s or 90s with Patrick Swayze in it, and just being like, wow, that's a star. Like, he's obviously stunning. And he's so talented. And I watched it being like, that movie ends and I'm like, wait, Patrick Swayze was in almost all of that movie, right? Because I'm thinking about him the entire time, because he fills a room when he's in it, even if he's only on screen for a few scenes. But just it made me like, I felt myself mourning Patrick Swayze, even though, you know, he died young, but we got so much great work from him. But watching it, like you were saying, the same thing about like Raul Julia, we got so much work from this person, but it will always feel like a cheat if we get anything short of a century worth of them being on our lives, because it's like, and you sort of, to recognize the instances of like exceptional connection or star power within something filled with so much of it is like, wow, you must really have it like that. When you, even among this ensemble, just name after name after name after name, you're still jumping out from the screen apart from everyone else.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Pony, you smoke more than a pack today, and I'll skin you, you understand?
Yeah. You carry more than one bundle of roofing at a time today, and me and Soda here will skin you. Understand?
Shoot. Hey, say hi to Johnny. All right.
My like concluding question for you then would be, does it take much of a conscientious effort to stay golden in what you do, and being in an industry that is so defined by like those common threads of like the hardest heartbreaks and then the highest highs that balance them out? Like, is the pursuit of staying golden something that can come naturally to you, or is that something where it's like, I got to keep my eye on the prize and have perspective to maintain this, because it's something that constantly wants to slip away?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like testament to my parents. There's a lot of things I could be bitter about, but there's a lot of things I am bitter about. But, but
okay, good. I want you to have your anger. I want you to have your anger too.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, but I want to believe in like that attainable goldness, you know, that I can find it in my career and in my craft, and I always try to surround myself with people who bring that goldenness out of me. Like, I recognize anyone who doesn't, who squashes that, and I try to eliminate them.
Good.
You know, those entities, those individuals, and I try to cultivate the relationships that foster that sense of goldenness in me. Like, and it can be a crazy industry, but it doesn't have to be.
No, that's a lie that gets upheld that only helps the people who make it hard. And I
that's
refuse
so true.
to accept
that's so
that.
well said. So well said. Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. It's all about who you surround yourself with. I'm like, you know, a friend's dad told us years ago, it's a good advice. And he said it in Spanish. He was like, in life, you have to have your mafia, which is, which are your friends and your associates. And, and his second piece of advice was hilarious because it was like, and then you have to be better than them. which just means like a healthy dose of competitiveness. That's a man I can relate
to right there. I like his attitude.
Totally. Like the healthy sense of competitiveness. You don't have to, you can be competitive without putting anyone down.
Oh, yeah.
We can all win. And I firmly believe in that.
Yes.
I want to lift people up. To your earlier point, like I've had angels in my life who have looked out for me. And I hope that I can continue to be that for people around me as well. Like I want to be a connective tissue. I do not want to be divisive. I have no interest in that. Life is too short. This is a collaborative art. It's innately collaborative. There's no room for ego as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, those things are very, very much important to me. Like I love healthy competitiveness, but also I want to lift people up and I want to bring people along for the ride with me. 100%.
When you're a kid, everything's new. Dawn. Like the way you dig sunsets, Pony, that's gold. Keep it that way. It's a good way to be. I want you to ask Dally to look at one. I don't think he's ever seen a sunset. There's still lots of good in the world. Tell Dally I don't think he knows. Your buddy, Johnny.
Well, thank you so much for all of the time that you have shared with me today, Raúl. I really appreciate having you on and talking about this character and how just your summer spent with Matt Dillon and the Outsiders. Thank you so much for taking the time. It was very generous of you, and I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jordan. It's been fun talking to you, and also reliving and re-exploring my love for this character in this film. Truly, it was really meaningful.
I'm glad we got you to the edge of tears. That's a threshold we're proud of here on the Feeling Seen podcast.
Awesome. I love it.
Raúl Castillo, folks. I will say I wasn't sure I would be able to make it through this interview without fainting personally, but I did it. And I am proud of myself, and what a delightful, just open, tender human being. So thank you, Raúl, for coming on. We very much appreciate your time. The Inspection is in theaters now, and very exciting news, it was just nominated for several Independent Spirit Awards. This really harkens back to the beginning of the show with one of our very first episodes, Isabel Furman. She came on when she was promoting The Novice, which was nominated, her nomination for an Independent Spirit Award. Feeling Seen, the unofficial official podcast of Independent Spirit Award nominees. You're all invited, so come and join me. And if you want to do a throwback to a classic, check out The Outsiders over the holiday weekend, and you can find it on HBO Max. What a murderer's row of stardom, but chief among them, of course, that's C. Thomas Howell. Simply no one broke out of that ensemble like C. Thomas Howell. And now, my one quick thing before I go, speaking of holiday weekend viewing, I have a friend back in the San Francisco Bay Area. Every year, her family does Thanksgiving, watching Tom Hanks movies. What a wonderful tradition. But you know what I think many more household traditions should be? And maybe it is. Maybe I'm just out of the loop. But many more people should make a Thanksgiving tradition of watching the excellent Thanksgiving film Addams Family Values. The first Addams Family starts off as like kind of a Christmas movie. Like we hear like little jingling bells and like carolers or something. It ends up on Halloween, because we have trick-or-treaters running to the door and then Lurch scares them away when he opens it. So it's a real holiday-centric, of course it's autumnal and wintry, it's the Addams Family. It's a real holiday-centric little franchise. And in Addams Family Values, we get one of the great Thanksgiving celebrations of all time put to screen in the form of Wednesday Addams. Spoiler, guys. Wednesday Addams has become exiled at her summer camp, and she decides to overthrow the ruling class One of which is camp counselor, ultra toxic positivity, Christine Baranski. We stan. Wednesday Addams decides she's going to get back at these hyper chipper, hyper perky campers and counselors, and she is going to turn the annual Thanksgiving pageant into a havoc-wreaking, barn-burning melee in which the reenactment of the first Thanksgiving is presented in a truer fashion, where the indigenous people overwhelm and destroy their white colonizers. I don't remember. I think it might be Christine Baranski who ends up on a spit being turned with an apple in her mouth by a camp counselor. Pugsley is the turkey, and Wednesday Addams is leading the revolution. So I can say safely, we all love the Addams Family, because we should, and if you don't, unsubscribe. Addams Family Values manages to be one of those rare, precious sequels that punches above the weight even of the original. What an excellent movie. In addition to being a Thanksgiving special, you also get one of the all-time great movie baddies who you don't love to hate, you just love to love, Debbie Jelinski, as played by Joan Cusack. This movie, it's all hits, no skips. What a nice thing, family friendly, to have on in the background for everyone enjoy, either while you're cooking or when you're all tucked in to the couches afterwards and watching something together. Have a very nice Thanksgiving with the Addams Family and their values and their small, presented as a genderless baby. Is it a boy? Is it a girl? It's an Addams. So yeah, check it out. The Addams Family Values. And that is our show. You can follow us on Twitter at FeelingScenePod or send us an email at feelingscene@MaximumFun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm Jor Crew on Twitter. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. The show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun. I just heard Wednesday's voice in my head going, wait. We cannot break bread with you.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows, supported directly by you.